Pregnant and exhausted, she makes coffee just like always. But something inside her has already changed. After another night of silence broken by violence, she decides not to pretend it's normal. Without screaming, without asking for permission, she chooses to protect 2 lives. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. We continue. The light Portland drizzle fell without hurry that Friday afternoon, wrapping the city in a grey mist that seemed to suck all the energy out of the day. Leah watched the drops run down the bus window, her forehead pressed against the cold glass, her tired eyes following the repetitive movement of the water. Her body ached. Everything ached. Her swollen feet barely fit into her work shoes, her back throbbed with that constant pain that seemed to have settled in since the beginning of her pregnancy, and her head felt as if it were carrying the entire world inside her skull. 4 months pregnant. 16 weeks of a pregnancy that should have been celebrated, planned, dreamed of. But Leah couldn't feel anything but a deep exhaustion that went far beyond the physical. It was a weariness that lived in her bones, that hid behind every breath, that turned each morning into a silent challenge of simply getting out of bed and moving forward. The bus jolted as it hit a pothole on the avenue, and she held on tight to the metal bar in front of her. Her free hand instinctively went to her belly, still discreet under the grey wool coat she wore every day. Inside, a life was growing, a life that depended completely on her. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Leah was 35, but she felt as if she had lived an entire lifetime. She worked as an administrative assistant at a small import company in downtown Portland, a cramped office on the 10th floor of a commercial building where the air conditioning was always broken and the coffee in the break room tasted like wet cardboard. The salary was modest, barely enough to help with the household bills, but she clung to that job like someone clinging to a piece of her own identity. Her boss, Mr. Wallace, was a 60-year-old man with a prominent belly and cigarette breath, who was always complaining about everything and everyone. Friday, he had been particularly irritated by a delay in the delivery of documents, and Leah had spent the last 3 hours redoing spreadsheets, reorganizing files, and listening to scoldings that weren't entirely her fault. But she listened. She always listened. She lowered her head, apologized, fixed everything, and moved on. That was how she had learned to survive. Don't confront, don't react. Just absorb, swallow, and continue. The bus stopped at the corner of S.W. Morrison Street, and Leah got off carefully, shielding her belly with her arm as she descended the high steps. The rain had picked up a bit, and she opened the old umbrella she carried in her purse, its bent spokes making a metallic noise as they stretched out. She walked 2 blocks to the small corner market, where she bought the essentials: rice, beans, 2 tomatoes, an onion, a pound of chicken. Nothing too elaborate, nothing that required too much effort. Money was tight. It was always tight. Derek had promised to deposit his share of the bills last Monday, but the money never arrived. She had asked once, carefully, choosing her words like someone disarming a bomb. He had exploded, yelled that she didn't understand anything, that he worked his ass off, that money didn't grow on trees. Leah had backed down, apologized, and returned to silence. It was always like that. Carrying the plastic bag in her left arm and the umbrella in her right hand, she continued along NW 23rd Avenue until she reached the small 5-story building where she lived. The facade was old, with peeling tiles and a green iron door that creaked every time someone entered. The elevator was broken again, so Leah slowly climbed the 3 flights of stairs, stopping on each landing to take a deep breath and relieve the weight on her back. 3rd floor, apartment 305. The key slid into the lock with that familiar sound of metal on metal, and she pushed the door open, smelling the characteristic scent of a closed space mixed with something she couldn't identify. Cigarettes, booze, mildew maybe. Derek was sprawled on the worn-out brown sofa in the living room, his legs spread, a can of beer in his right hand, his eyes fixed on the television showing some sports program. He didn't turn around when she came in, didn't say hi, didn't ask how her day was. He just stayed there, motionless, like a permanent extension of the furniture. Leah closed the door slowly, took off her painful shoes, and carried the bag to the small kitchen. The sink was full of dirty dishes from the night before. She had left too early to wash them, and Derek certainly hadn't touched a thing. He never did. The kitchen was her territory, as was the cleaning, the organizing, the bills, everything. He worked, drank, and watched television. That was the cycle. She began to put the groceries away in the old cabinets, her hands moving on autopilot. She opened the refrigerator and placed the chicken on the bottom shelf, put the tomatoes in the vegetable drawer, closed the door with a sigh that came from deep inside, from some hidden place where a different Leah still existed, a version of her that might have had her own dreams. That version seemed so distant now. She turned on the faucet and began to wash the dishes, the warm water running between her fingers, washing away the food scraps stuck to the plates. The sink faced a small window that looked out onto the building's inner courtyard, where you could see the neighbors' windows, clothes hanging on lines, life happening in small fragments of reality. A woman was hanging sheets on the 5th floor. A child was playing with a red plastic car on the 2nd. Life went on. It always went on. How much time passed, Leah couldn't say. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. By the time she finished washing and drying everything, it was already getting dark outside. She started preparing dinner, dicing the tomatoes, chopping the onion, seasoning the chicken with garlic, salt, and lemon. The movements were mechanical, rehearsed over years of repetition. "What time did you get in?" Derek's voice came from the living room, slurred, without a question mark. It wasn't a question, it was a disguised demand. "About 40 minutes ago," Leah replied, keeping her voice neutral. "The bus was late because of the rain." Silence. She continued chopping the onion, her eyes burning from the strong smell rising from the wooden cutting board. She knew he was still there, on the sofa, probably drinking another beer. She could feel his presence even without seeing him, as if the air in the house changed when he was in that state. "What are you making for dinner?" "Chicken with rice and beans. Again." "There wasn't much at the store today, Derek. I bought what I could." Another silence. Heavier this time. Leah knew those silences. They were like clouds before a storm, warnings that something was building up, about to explode. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, trying not to let the fear rise in her throat. "You don't work, do you? But you can't even make a decent dinner." The sentence hit like a punch to the gut. Leah stopped chopping, the knife suspended in midair, her heart racing. "I do work, Derek. You know I work. You make peanuts. It's not even worth it." She bit her lip, tasting the metallic tang of blood mixed with the anger that was beginning to simmer slowly inside her chest. But she couldn't react. She shouldn't react. It was dangerous to react. So she just went back to chopping the onion, the tears in her eyes now not just from the vegetable. Derek appeared in the kitchen doorway, leaning against the frame, the beer can dangling from his hand. He was 38, with short dark hair and a few days' worth of stubble. He wore a stained white t-shirt and faded denim shorts. His eyes were red, puffy, that look she knew well. He had been drinking more than he should have. Again. "You know, you look like an old woman. All let go. Look at those clothes. It's like you don't even take care of yourself anymore." Leah gripped the knife handle tighter, but said nothing. She kept chopping, breathing, trying to keep her mind focused on the simple task of preparing dinner. "I'm talking to you, Leah. I heard you, Derek. And you don't answer. What do you want me to say?" "Anything. You've turned into a zombie. All you know how to do is work, complain, and make a sour face." "I'm not complaining about anything." "Yes, you are, standing there with that martyr face, like you're the only one who works in this house." Leah dropped the knife on the cutting board and turned to him, her hands still wet, her chest rising and falling quickly. "I didn't say anything, Derek. I just got home, put away the groceries, and I'm making dinner. I don't understand why you're like this." "Like what? Aggressive, looking for a fight?" He took a step into the kitchen, and Leah felt the space shrink. The kitchen was already small, but with him in it, it seemed to get even smaller, the walls closing in, the air growing heavier. "I'm not looking for a fight. I'm just tired of coming home and seeing that sour face every day. You don't even greet me properly when I'm here. You didn't greet me when I got home either. Because I'm tired, Leah. I worked all day. I'm not obligated to throw you a party. And I worked all day too, Derek, and I'm pregnant. The word slipped out before she could stop it. Pregnant. As if that were a sufficient argument. As if that changed anything. Derek let out a short, humorless laugh. Oh, the pregnancy. Of course. Now you're going to use that for everything, right? She's pregnant, poor thing. Everyone has to feel sorry for pregnant Leah. It's not about feeling sorry, Derek. It's about understanding that I'm carrying a child, your child, and that I'm tired. My body is tired. I just wanted a little what? Say it. A little what? Respect. The silence that followed was so thick Leah could feel its weight in the air. Derek stood there looking at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Anger, contempt, frustration, all mixed into a look that made her feel small, insignificant. Respect, he repeated, his voice low, dangerous. You want respect? And what do you think I do, Leah? I work like a dog at that auto shop, come home all dirty, all broken, and you want respect. You who can barely buy a decent dinner. Money's tight, Derek. We need to save. The baby's coming, there are bills. There's always something, isn't there? Always an excuse. You can't do anything right. Leah felt hot tears stream down her face, but she did nothing to wipe them away. She was too tired to care, tired of trying, tired of explaining, tired of existing in that space where nothing she did was ever enough. Derek turned and went back to the living room, leaving her alone in the kitchen. She heard the sound of the TV volume increasing, the noise of sports commentators filling the apartment. She took a few deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart, trying to push away the lump forming in her throat. She went back to preparing dinner, her hands trembling slightly. She lit the stove, put the pan with oil on, and threw in the chopped onion. The smell rose, familiar and comforting in some strange way. Cooking had always been a refuge, an activity where she had control, where things made sense. You chop, you season, you cook, and in the end you have food. Simple as that. But nothing was simple anymore. The pregnancy had been a surprise. They weren't trying. In fact, for a long time they hadn't been trying for anything other than surviving day to day. But it happened. One random night, one random moment, and now there she was, pregnant with a child she wasn't even sure would be welcome in this home. Derek had reacted badly to the news, very badly. He yelled, accused her, insinuated terrible things. Then he apologized, said he was just scared, that he would do better. But nothing got better. If anything, it got worse. The drinking increased. The angry outbursts became more frequent. The silence between them grew denser, more charged with unsaid things. Leah added the chicken to the pan, stirring slowly, watching the pieces brown. She thought of her mother. Celia had died 3 years ago, taken by a cancer that appeared quickly and advanced even faster. In her last days in the hospital, she had held Leah's hand and said in a weak voice that she regretted many things, not being stronger, not leaving when she should have, enduring so much. Leah hadn't fully understood at the time. Now she did. Her mother had lived in a similar marriage. Leah's father, Owen, was a hard man, of few words and a lot of pent-up anger. He worked as a truck driver and spent weeks away from home. When he returned, he brought gifts and promises, but he also brought a tension that turned the house into a minefield. Leah grew up walking on tiptoes, trying not to make noise, trying not to draw attention. When she was 18, she ran away, got a job, rented a tiny room, and swore she would never go back to that house. She met Derek 2 years later at a friend's holiday party. He was handsome, funny, attentive. He seemed like everything she needed. He seemed like safety. They married after a year of dating. The first few months were good. Derek worked regularly, helped around the house, they made plans together. But slowly things started to change. Small bursts of anger, sarcastic comments, demands, and then the drinking. First on weekends, then during the week too. And with the drinking came the other person, the Derek she didn't know, the Derek who yelled, insulted, destroyed. She had tried to talk, had suggested help, therapy, support groups, anything, but he would laugh, say he didn't need any of that, that she was exaggerating. And she believed him, or wanted to believe him, or was too afraid not to. Believe him. The rice was bubbling in the pot next to her, and Leah added salt, waited for it to boil, then lowered the heat. All on autopilot, body and mind in different places, her body there in the kitchen, making dinner, her mind far away, wandering through memories and fears, trying to find an escape that didn't exist. When dinner was ready, she set the table. 2 plates, 2 glasses, 2 forks. She called Derek, who came shuffling his feet, still with the beer can in his hand. He sat down without a word and started eating in silence. Leah sat down too, but she wasn't hungry. She stared at the food without appetite, pushing the rice from one side of the plate to the other with her fork. Her stomach hurt a little, a strange sensation. She didn't know if it was normal or something to worry about. Everything in her ached one way or another. "This is bad," Derek said, his mouth full. Leah didn't answer. "I said this is bad, Leah." "Sorry. Sorry doesn't cut it. You should have done it right." She let the fork drop onto the plate, the metallic sound echoing in the small kitchen. She stood up, took her plate, and threw everything in the trash. She didn't have the energy for this anymore. She didn't have the energy for anything. "Where do you think you're going?" Derek yelled, standing up too. "To the bedroom. We're not done with dinner." "I am, Leah." His voice had that tone that came before everything fell apart. She stopped in the middle of the living room, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She turned slowly, meeting his eyes. They were redder now, cloudier. He had been drinking more while she cooked. He always drank more. "What do you want, Derek?" "Respect," he spat the word back at her. "You said you want respect. I want it too. You can't just get up and leave in the middle of dinner." "I'm not hungry." "It doesn't matter. You're going to sit down and you're going to eat." "I'm not." The first slap came fast, unexpected. Derek's open hand hit Leah's face with enough force to snap her head to the side, the sound echoing through the room like distant thunder. The pain exploded on her cheek, sharp and hot, and she staggered backward, trying to process what had just happened. For a second they stood frozen, Derek looking at his own hand as if it belonged to someone else. Leah holding her face, the shock turning everything to slow motion. And then he came at her again. The second blow was to her shoulder, pushing her back. Leah tripped on the edge of the living room rug, losing her balance. Instinctively, her hands went to her belly, trying to protect the baby, trying to protect that fragile life growing inside her. But her body didn't obey fast enough. She fell sideways, hitting her hip, on the floor with an impact that knocked all the air out of her lungs. The pain spread like fire. Hip, back, arm, face. Everything hurt at once, a chaotic symphony of signals her brain could barely process. She lay there, curled up on the living room floor, trying to breathe, trying to understand, trying to exist. Derek stood over her for a few seconds that felt like hours. Then he turned and went back to the sofa, grabbed another beer from the fridge, turned up the volume on the TV, as if nothing had happened. Leah remained on the floor, her body aching too much to move, her mind spinning in circles, trying to find an explanation, an excuse, anything that would make it make sense. But it didn't. Nothing did. After a time she couldn't measure, she managed to drag herself to the bathroom. She locked the door with trembling hands and turned on the fluorescent light, which flickered a few times before stabilizing. The mirror above the sink was cracked in the upper right corner, an old fissure that split her reflection in two. Leah looked at herself. Her face was swollen on the left side, the mark of Derek's fingers still visible on the reddened skin. Her lower lip had a small cut that was bleeding slowly. Her eyes were red, swollen with tears she hadn't even realized were falling. But it was something else that caught her attention, something different in her gaze, something she hadn't seen in a long time. For the first time in years, Leah didn't just see herself as a victim. She saw a pregnant woman. A woman carrying a life that depended on her, a life that deserved better than this. Her hands went instinctively to her belly, feeling the small curve that was beginning to form. 4 months, 16 weeks, a whole person growing in there, trusting her, needing her, and she was on the bathroom floor, Bruised, bleeding, broken. No. The word came out low, almost a whisper, but loaded with something new. Something Leah didn't know still existed inside her. No. She washed her face with cold water, cleaned the cut on her lip, tried to ease the swelling. Every movement hurt, but the physical pain was almost welcome now. It was concrete. It was real. It was something she could name. She left the bathroom and went straight to the bedroom. Derek was still on the sofa, the TV still on, the beer still in his hand. She closed the bedroom door slowly and lay down on the bed, still dressed, still hurting. The night passed in fragments. Leah slept and woke several times, her body protesting every movement. She could hear Derek snoring in the living room, the deep, irregular sound filling the apartment. Sometime in the early morning, she felt the baby move for the first time. A small, almost imperceptible flutter, but it was there. Life. At 5 in the morning, when the city was still asleep and the rain had let up, Leah got up. Her body ached, but her mind was strangely clear, crystalline even. She went to the kitchen, turned on the light, and looked around. She made coffee, fried eggs, toasted bread. The gestures were automatic, but there was something different now, something she couldn't name yet, but it was there, growing along with the baby in her belly, along with the courage that was beginning to sprout where before there had only been fear. Derek woke up to the smell of coffee, dragging himself to the kitchen with swollen eyes and messy hair. He sat at the table without saying good morning, took the cup Leah placed in front of him, and drank in silence. He looked at her swollen face, at her cut lip, and he smiled, a small, cruel smile. "You hurt yourself yesterday," he said, as if it were a casual observation about the weather. Leah held the cup with both hands, feeling the heat through the porcelain. "You hit me, Derek." The words came out firm, clear, unwavering. Derek stopped chewing. He looked at her with an expression that mixed surprise and irritation. "You're exaggerating. It was just a push. You're the one who fell. You hit me, in the face, and you pushed me. I'm pregnant, Derek. You could have hurt our child." "Our child," he repeated with contempt. "You don't even know if this kid is mine." The accusation hung in the air, venomous and absurd. Leah felt the anger rise, hot and urgent, but she didn't let it take over. There was something more important now. She got up from the table, went to the landline on the living room wall and dialed a number she had memorized years ago but had never had the courage to use. "What are you doing?" Derek asked, getting up too. "Calling the police." "You're not doing that." "I am." The operator's voice came from the other end of the line, professional and distant. Leah took a deep breath. "I need to report an assault." And as she spoke, as she reported what had happened, while Derek yelled in the background that she was crazy, that she would regret it, that no one would believe her, Leah felt something break inside her chest. It wasn't her heart, it was the chain. The patrol car arrived in 20 minutes, but to Leah it felt like hours. She sat on the living room sofa, her hands clasped over her belly, the phone still in her hand, while Derek paced back and forth like a caged animal. He alternated between screaming threats and trying to persuade her to cancel the call, his voice oscillating between rage and something that almost sounded like desperation. "You're crazy, Leah. Crazy. This is going to ruin everything. Us. This home. You're not thinking straight." She didn't answer. She just stared at the wall in front of her, where there was a photograph of the two of them taken 5 years ago on a trip to the Columbia River Gorge. They were smiling. They looked happy. They looked like completely different people. "You're going to regret this. I swear you're going to regret this." The doorbell rang, 3 short, sharp rings that cut through the air like blades. Derek stopped pacing, frozen in the middle of the room, his wide eyes fixed on the door. Leah stood up slowly, her legs shaky, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her temples. She opened the door. Zikaizo. Police officers were there. A tall man, about 40, with a greying moustache and a tired expression. A younger woman, her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, her observant eyes immediately noticing Leah's bruised face. "Ma'am, did you make the call?" the female officer asked. her voice professional but not without kindness. "I did," Leah replied, her voice coming out firmer than she expected. The officers entered the small apartment, and their presence seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. Derek was standing near the sofa, his hands on his hips, trying to look casual but failing miserably. The smell of beer still hung in the air. "And you are, sir?" began the officer with the mustache. Derek Miller. I live here. I'm her husband." The female officer approached Leah, making a subtle gesture with her head. "Can we talk in another room?" Leah nodded, and the two went into the bedroom, closing the door slowly. The space was small, with a double bed against the wall, a dark wood wardrobe, and a dresser with a mirror. The window looked out onto the street, where you could see the patrol car parked below, its lights still flashing. "My name is Officer Franklin," the officer said, taking a small notepad from her pocket. "Can you tell me what happened?" And Leah told her. Every word hurt, as if she were tearing pieces of herself out, but she continued. She spoke of the argument at dinner, the first slap, the push, the fall. She spoke of the pregnancy, the 4 months, the fear of losing the baby. She spoke of the other times, the angry outbursts, the drinking, the control, the heavy silences that turned the house into a silent battlefield. Franklin wrote everything down, asking questions, when necessary, keeping her voice low and calm. When Leah finished, the officer looked up from her notepad and looked directly at her. "Do you want to press charges? Because once we file a report, there's no going back. There will be a police report. There will be a case. There will be everything that comes with it." "I do," Leah said without hesitation. Franklin nodded. "Then we'll need you to come down to the precinct with us to make a formal statement. We'll take him too, but in separate cars, okay?" "Okay." "Do you have someone you can call? Family, friends? It's not good to be alone after this." "I have a friend, Rebecca. Call her now if you can." Leah picked up the cell phone that was on the dresser and dialed Rebecca's number with trembling fingers. It rang 3 times before the familiar voice answered. "Hello? Becca, it's Leah." "Leah? What time is it? Is everything okay?" "No, it's not. I need you." The tone of her voice was enough. Rebecca had known Leah for 15 years, since they worked together at a clothing store downtown. They were true friends, the kind who show up when everything falls apart. "What happened? Where are you?" "At home. The police are here. I'm going to the precinct to file a report. Derek, he hit me. Becca." Silence on the other end. Then Rebecca's voice, firm as steel. "I'm on my way." "Which precinct?" Officer Franklin took the phone and quickly gave her the information before handing it back to Leah. "We're going to the downtown precinct. Your friend can meet us there." When they returned to the living room, Derek was sitting on the sofa, with the mustached officer standing beside him, blocking any attempt to flee. He looked at Leah with an expression she couldn't decipher. Anger, certainly, but also something that almost looked like betrayal, as if she had committed the greatest of sins by asking for help. "Mr. Miller, we're going to need you to accompany us to the station," Franklin said in a firm voice. "Why? I didn't do anything." "There's an accusation of domestic assault. You have the right to give your side of the story. Let's go." Derek stood up, walking past Leah without looking at her. Officer Franklin stayed by her side while her colleague escorted Derek out. He was cooperative, didn't resist, but hatred radiated from every pore of his body. "Let's go too," Franklin said softly. "I'll ride with you in the patrol car. My partner will take him in another car." The walk down the stairs was slow and surreal. Leah held on tight to the railing, each step a small victory over the fear that tried to paralyze her. A few neighbors had opened their doors upon hearing the commotion, but quickly closed them when they saw the patrol cars. No one wanted to get involved. They never did. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes through the still empty streets of Portland. The sky was lightening, that gray dawn light that precedes the sunrise. Leah looked out the window without really seeing anything, her mind floating somewhere between the present and the uncertain future that was opening up before her. The Family Services Unit was in a single-story beige building with bars on the windows and a discreet sign at the entrance. Franklin helped Leah out of the car and guided her inside, down a narrow hallway to a small room with light green walls and metal furniture. "Sit here. I'll get the detective." Leah sat on a hard plastic chair and waited. The room had a wall clock that ticked too loudly, marking each second with cruel precision. It was 6:20 on a Saturday morning. Under normal circumstances, she would still be asleep, but there was nothing normal about her life anymore. The detective was a woman in her 50s, with short, dyed brown hair, thick-rimmed glasses, and an expression that combined toughness with understanding. She sat behind the desk and began asking questions, many of the same ones Franklin had already asked, but this time they were being officially recorded on the computer. Full name, age, address, profession, assailant's details, description of events. Leah answered everything with a calmness that surprised her. It was as if she were talking about someone else, about a life that wasn't hers. The clerk typed quickly, her fingers flying over the keyboard, turning pain into words, words into an official document. "Do you want a protective order? That means he can't come near you, can't contact you by phone, text, or any other means. If he violates it, he can be arrested." "I do." More forms, more questions, more signatures. When they finally finished, it was almost 8 o'clock. Leah was exhausted in a way that went beyond the physical. It was a soul-deep weariness, as if every word spoken had drained a little more of her life force. Franklin took her to the reception area, where Rebecca was already waiting. She stood up as soon as she saw Leah, her eyes immediately going to the bruised face, the cut lip, the bruises that were beginning to darken on her fair skin. "Oh, Leah." That was all she said before hugging her. A strong, tight hug that held not just her body but also the pieces that were shattering inside. Leah sank into that embrace and finally, let the tears fall for real. They cried right there, in the middle of the police station, not caring who was watching. When they separated, Rebecca held Leah's face in her hands, looking into her eyes with an intensity that allowed no escape. "You were so brave, and I'm going to be here, every step of the way, you understand?" Leah nodded, unable to speak. "Let's get out of here. You're staying at my place. I'm not taking no for an answer. But I need to get my things, clothes, documents, we'll get them. But not today. Today you're coming with me, you're going to take a shower, eat something and rest. We'll figure out the rest later." Rebecca lived in an apartment in the Nob Hill neighborhood, a small but cozy space that smelled of fresh coffee and had plants in every corner. She had been divorced for 3 years, worked as an English teacher at a public school, and had an energy that was always contagious. She took her friend straight to the bathroom, prepared a bath with warm water and bath salts, and left out a clean towel and comfortable clothes. "Stay in there as long as you need. I'm going to make breakfast." Leah took off the clothes she had been wearing since the day before, stained with sweat and tears and fear, and sank into the warm water. Her body ached less now, or maybe she was just used to the pain. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about anything, but the thoughts came anyway, relentless. Derek was at the station. He had given his statement. He had probably denied everything, or downplayed it, or blamed her. It was always like that. It was never his fault. There was always a justification, an excuse, someone else to blame. But now there was an official document. There were witnesses. There was physical evidence on her face. There was a baby being protected. She ran her hand over her belly, feeling the small curve. 4 months. 5 more to go. 5 months to plan, to get organized, to build something safe for this child to be born into. She got out of the bath when the water started to cool. She put on the clothes Rebecca had left out, a pair of grey sweatpants, and a navy blue long-sleeved shirt. They were big on her. Rebecca was larger, but they were comfortable and smelled of fabric softener and safety. In the kitchen, Rebecca had prepared a feast. Crusty bread, cheese, ham, sliced papaya, orange juice, steaming coffee. Leah sat down and ate slowly, each bite feeling strange in her mouth, but forcing herself to swallow because she knew she had to. For the baby. For herself. "Have you thought about what you're going to do now?" Rebecca asked, pouring more coffee. Leah shook her head. I don't know, everything happened so fast. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house, not with the baby coming. You're right, you couldn't, and you're not going back. I won't let you. But I need a place to stay. I can't stay here forever, Becca. You already do too much. Stop. You stay as long as you need. My sofa pulls out, it's comfortable, and it's not forever. It's until you get on your feet. Leah felt her eyes well up again, but this time it wasn't just sadness. It was gratitude, too, for having someone, for not being completely alone. There's something else, she said slowly. I was thinking of going to the coast to visit Derek's mum. Rebecca almost spit out her coffee. Your mother-in-law? Are you serious? I am. Marcia lives in Seaside. We've always gotten along. She's different from her son, and I need her to know what happened. I can't let him control the narrative. That makes sense. When do you want to go? Today, if possible. Rebecca looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll take you. They hit the road around 11 in the morning. The sky had cleared a bit, revealing patches of blue between the grey clouds. The drive to the coast took about 2 hours, cutting through the hills before descending to the coastal plain. Leah looked out the window as Rebecca drove, watching the landscape gradually change. Pine trees gave way to lower vegetation. The air grew more humid. The smell of the sea began to creep in even before they could see it. Marcia lived in a simple house 2 blocks from the beach, a white-painted cinder block building with blue windows and a small front garden where she grew roses and geraniums. She was 63, a widow for 10 years, and worked as a seamstress, doing repairs and alterations for locals and tourists. When Leah knocked on the door, she heard the sound of shuffling footsteps from inside. The door opened and Marcia appeared, a dish towel in her hands, her grey hair in a low bun, her kind brown eyes behind reading glasses. The welcoming smile died on her lips when she saw Leah's face. My God, what happened to you, child? Leah tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. It was Rebecca who explained quickly and bluntly, while Marcia held Leah's hand with increasing force. It was Derek. It was my son who did this to you. It wasn't a question. It was the painful realization of someone who recognized the pattern. Come in quickly. The house smelled of freshly brewed coffee and cornbread. Marcia led them to the living room, a small room with old but well-cared-for furniture, white lace curtains filtering the midday light. Sit here, honey. Rebecca, you too. I'll get some tea. You don't have to trouble yourself, Marcia. It's no trouble. It's a necessity. She returned minutes later with a tray carrying a steaming kettle, delicate porcelain cups, and a plate, with slices of cake. She served tea to both of them and sat in the armchair across from them, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. And Leah told her everything again, every detail, every word, every tear. When she finished, Marcia's eyes were filled with tears too. I knew it. Deep down I always knew Derek had that in him. His father was like that. My late husband. Leah looked at her mother-in-law in surprise. I was beaten for 25 years, in silence, thinking it was my duty to endure it, that's how marriage worked. When he died, you know what I felt? Relief. And a huge guilt for feeling relief. Marcia wiped her eyes with the dish towel she was still holding. I tried to raise Derek differently. I swear I tried. I talked to him, showed him another way, never laid a hand on him. But there are things we carry in our blood, you know, things that come from seeing so much, hearing so much. He saw his father treat me badly and thought it was normal. I didn't know how to break that cycle. It's not your fault, Marcia. I know, but it still hurts. It hurts to know that my son became the man I spent my life trying to prevent him from being. The mother-in-law stood up and went to Leah, kneeling beside the chair and holding her hands. You did the right thing, righter than anything I ever did in my whole life. You reported him, you protected yourself, and you protected my grandchild. Marcia's hand rested gently on Leah's belly. This child will be born into a better world than the one I gave Derek. I'm going to help with that. You can stay here as long as you need. This house is yours too. Leah looked at Rebecca, who nodded encouragingly, then looked back at Marcia. I don't want to be a burden. A burden is seeing a pregnant, bruised girl and doing nothing. That's a burden. Taking you in is what decent people do. And so it was decided. Rebecca drove back to Portland late that afternoon, but not before making Leah promise to call every day. Marcia prepared the guest room, changed the sheets, and put fresh flowers in a vase on the dresser. That night, for the first time in years, Leah slept without fear. The sound of the ocean waves came through the slightly open window, rhythmic and constant, like an old lullaby she had forgotten she knew. In the days that followed, a routine was established. Marcia worked on her sewing in the morning while Leah rested, still recovering from the physical and emotional pain. In the afternoons, they walked together on the beach, their bare feet on the cool sand, the salty wind in their hair. Her mother-in-law told stories about her husband, about what her marriage had been like, about her mistakes and regrets. She spoke with a brutal honesty that was both painful and liberating. I used to wonder why he did it, what I had done wrong. It took me years to understand that it wasn't about me. It was about him, about the anger he carried from places I didn't even know. Leah listened, absorbing every word like precious lessons. A week later, Derek called Marcia's house. She answered, and from the tone of her voice, Leah knew who it was. "No, you're not speaking to her. Not after what you did." The mother paused, listening to whatever he was saying on the other end. "I'm not defending anyone, Derek. I'm defending what's right, and what's right is for you to stay away from her until you learn to be a decent human being." She slammed the phone down and returned to the kitchen, where Leah was sitting at the table, peeling potatoes for lunch. That was him. I figured. He said you're exaggerating, that it was a misunderstanding, that you're turning me against him. Leah continued peeling the potatoes, the repetitive motion calming her nerves. "And what do you think?" Marcia sat down across from her. "I think my son needs help that I can't give him. And you need protection that only you can guarantee for yourself. So I'm going to support you in this, in every decision, every step of the way. Thank you." "Don't thank me, honey. This is the least any mother should do." The weeks went by. Leah's belly grew visibly now, the curve becoming more pronounced under the loose clothes that Marcia adjusted for her. The baby moved more frequently, little kicks and punches that made Leah smile despite everything. Rebecca visited on weekends, bringing news from Portland. She had gone to the apartment with police authorization and collected Leah's clothes. And documents. Derek wasn't there. No one knew where he was living. "The case is moving forward," Rebecca would say. "The lawyer I recommended said that with the evidence they have, the protective order will be maintained for a good while." Leah nodded, but a part of her couldn't help but feel a pang of something that wasn't exactly guilt, but felt a lot like it. Years of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. It was Marcia who noticed one evening as they sat on the porch, listening to the sound of the sea. "You still feel guilty, don't you?" Leah took a moment to answer. "Sometimes it's strange. I know I did the right thing. I know he hurt me. I know I needed to leave. But there's a part of me that still wonders if I could have done things differently, if I could have helped him in another way." "You couldn't." "How do you know?" "Because I tried. For 25 years I tried. And you know what I got? Nothing but more pain. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Leah, and you can't destroy yourself trying." The words hung in the salty night air, true and difficult. "Your only job now is to take care of yourself and this baby. The rest, Derek, the guilt, the past, all of that will have to wait, because you have a life ahead of you, and that life deserves to be good." Leah placed her hand on her belly, feeling a strong kick. She smiled. For the first time in a long time, the smile wasn't weighed down by fear or obligation. It was genuine. "I'm going to make it work. Somehow, I'm going to make it work." And that night, lulled by the sound of the ocean and the fragile but growing certainty that she had made the right decision, Leah slept in peace. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was hers to decide. 2 months passed like sand slipping through her fingers. Leah woke up every day to the sound of seagulls and the smell of the sea coming through the window of the guest room that had become her sanctuary. Her belly was big now, impossible to hide, a constant presence that made her walk differently, sit differently, exist differently. 6 months pregnant, 24 weeks. The baby had grown, gotten stronger, developed its own personality with vigorous kicks that always came after meals and during the night. The doctor had confirmed it was a boy. Leah hadn't chosen a name yet, but she liked to talk to him, to put her hand on her belly and feel the responses in the form of movement. The routine on the coast had settled in naturally. Marcia woke up early, made a hearty breakfast, and went for a walk on the beach before the tourists invaded the sand. Leah would wake up a little later, have a slow breakfast on the porch, watching the people come and go, the eternal movement of the ocean. Afterward, she would help her mother-in-law with the sewing. She had learned to do simple hems, adjust lengths, sew on buttons. The hands that once only typed numbers into spreadsheets now created small, precise stitches in fabrics of various colors. There was something meditative about that manual labor, something that calmed a mind always agitated by worries about the future. But the past hadn't disappeared. It was still there like a persistent shadow. Derek had tried to make contact several times, blocked calls, messages through mutual acquaintances, even a letter that arrived in the mail on a Tuesday afternoon. Marcia intercepted it and asked if Leah wanted to read it. She hesitated but eventually agreed. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten in Derek's irregular script. He apologized, said he was in treatment for alcoholism, that he had realized his mistakes, that he wanted to be a father, to be present, to start over. He promised change, swore he understood, begged for a chance. Leah read it all in silence, sitting on the porch, the ocean rhythmically crashing below. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer in her room. She didn't reply, didn't call, didn't do anything, because she had heard promises before, hundreds of them, and they had all lasted until the next bottle of beer, until the next argument, until the next explosion. Rebecca continued to visit on weekends, always bringing news from Portland. The apartment remained closed, the bills being paid with Leah's salary, which she managed to keep by working remotely a few hours a day. Mr. Wallace had accepted the temporary situation, though he grumbled about her lack of commitment. The legal process moved slowly, like everything, involving the justice system. The protective order was active, renewed for another 6 months. Derek couldn't come within 500 yards of Leah. He had been ordered to attend counseling and was forbidden from consuming alcohol, although no one could really enforce that part. The lawyer Rebecca had recommended, Mr. Reynolds, called every 2 weeks with updates. He was a patient man with a calm voice who explained each step of the process with a clarity Leah appreciated. There was no rush, he said. The important thing was to ensure her safety and the baby's. On a particularly hot afternoon in January, while Leah was resting on the living room sofa with her feet propped up on pillows to relieve the swelling, Marcia came in carrying a large envelope. "This came for you, from the lawyer." Leah opened the envelope with anxious fingers. Inside were copies of documents, reports, and an explanatory letter from Mr. Reynolds. Derek had attended 3 therapy sessions as ordered by the court. The psychologist in charge couldn't break confidentiality, but confirmed his attendance. There was also a request for supervised visits with the baby after the birth. Leah's stomach churned. "He wants to see the baby," Marcia said, reading over her shoulder. "It's his right. He's the father. But you're not obligated to accept, not after what happened." "I know, but it's complicated, isn't it? It's not just about me. It's about my son, too. He's going to grow up and ask questions. He's going to want to know about his father." Marcia sat down beside her, holding her hand. "You have time to decide that. The baby isn't even born yet. And when he is, you'll be stronger, more prepared. You don't have to solve everything right now." Leah nodded, but the worry remained, settled. In her chest, another weight among so many others. That night she couldn't sleep well. She lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the sea, feeling the baby move. She thought about the future, about what it would be like to raise a child alone, about how she would explain to him one day why his father didn't live with them, about how she would handle supervised visits, split weekends, all the complexity that came with a broken family. But then, she remembered something Marcia had said weeks ago. A broken family is one where there's violence, where there's fear, where children grow up walking on eggshells. A mended family is one where there's safety, even if it's different from the traditional model. That calmed her a little, enough to finally fall asleep. The days continued to pass. February arrived with heavy rains that flooded the streets of downtown Seaside and turned the beach into a spectacle of giant waves. Leah spent the afternoons indoors, sewing alongside Marcia, listening to old family stories, learning recipes her mother-in-law had kept for decades. It was on one of those rainy afternoons that the idea came to her. Marcia had mentioned that a neighbor was looking for someone to help with the bookkeeping for the small restaurant she owned on the beach. Nothing too complex, just organizing receipts, managing cash flow, helping with basic tax forms. "I know how to do that," Leah said suddenly. "It's practically what I do at the office." "So why don't you offer? Connie is a good person, pays on time." Leah thought for a moment. Working again, even informally, meant having her own money, not being completely dependent on Marcia's generosity. It meant having a purpose beyond waiting for the baby to be born. "I'll talk to her." The next day, when the rain let up, Leah walked to the Seabreeze restaurant, a simple establishment facing the beach, with white plastic tables and a menu based on fresh seafood. Connie was a plump woman in her 50s, with curly blonde hair, a wide smile, and a loud voice. "You're Marcia's daughter-in-law, right? The girl who's staying with her?" "I am." "Leah." "Well, honey, what can I do for you?" Leah explained that she had experience in bookkeeping and could help with the restaurant's financial organization. Connie looked her up and down, noticing the large belly, then smiled. "You work even when you're pregnant like this?" "I do. I need to keep busy." "I like a hard-working woman. You can start Monday, 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. I'll pay you by the hour. Sound good?" "Sounds perfect." And so Leah returned to the world of work. It was different from the office in Portland, much less formal, with no grumpy boss or broken air conditioning, but it had its own dignity. She would arrive, organize the scattered papers Connie accumulated in a shoebox, type everything into simple spreadsheets, and bring order to the chaos. The money wasn't much, but it was hers, earned with her own effort. And that mattered. The weeks turned into months. March arrived calmer, with fewer tourists and milder temperatures. Leah's belly was huge now, a perfect ball that made her waddle when she walked. 7.5 months. The doctor said everything was fine, that the baby was healthy, growing at the right pace. Rebecca had organized a simple baby shower at Marcia's house. A few neighbors came, Connie from the restaurant, some of Marcia's old sewing clients. It was nothing extravagant, just homemade. Cakes, fresh juices, and modest but useful gifts. Diapers, onesies, blankets, pacifiers. Leah sat among those women, and for the first time in months felt part of something bigger. A community. A group that welcomed her without judgment, without invasive questions about the baby's father, or the bruises that had long since faded from her face, but still existed in her memory. When the party ended and everyone had gone home, Rebecca stayed to help clean up. The two washed dishes side by side in Marcia's kitchen, in a comfortable silence. "You're different," Rebecca said suddenly. "Different how?" "Lighter. More. Yo, it's been a long time since I've seen you like this." Leah thought about it as she rinsed a plate. "I think it's because I can breathe, without being afraid of when the next explosion will come, without having to choose my words all the time. It's strange at first, you know, like I forgot what it's like to live without walking on eggshells. But you're remembering now." "I am. Slowly." Rebecca hugged her from behind, resting her chin on her friend's shoulder. "I'm so proud of you. You have no idea how much." Leah felt her eyes burn but didn't let the tears fall. She had cried enough. Now it was time to rebuild. In early April, when Leah was 8 months along, Mr. Reynolds called with important news. The criminal case against Derek had been formally filed. There would be a hearing in May and she would have to testify. The news hit her like a stone in her stomach. Testifying meant going back to Portland. It meant being in the same building as Derek, even if in separate rooms. It meant reliving everything all over again, but this time in front of a judge. "I'll be there with you," Mr. Reynolds said. "And you can bring someone for support. You don't have to go through this alone." Leah thanked him and hung up, her hands shaking. Marcia entered the room at that moment, saw the expression on her face, and didn't need to ask. She just sat beside her, a silent, comforting presence. "I have to go back to Portland," Leah said finally, "for the hearing, to testify." "When?" "May 15th. "I'm going with you." "You don't have to, Marcia. You have your work here, your clients. Don't have to doesn't exist when it comes to family. And you are family, Leah, more than my son ever knew how to appreciate." The two hugged right there, on the worn-out living room sofa, while outside the sun set over the ocean, painting everything in orange and pink. The days leading up to the trip were tense. Leah tried to stay calm, to focus on her work at the restaurant, on the sewing, on her walks along the beach. But the anxiety was always there, a constant presence that tightened her chest and quickened her heart. The baby felt it. He moved more, kicked harder, as if trying to comfort his mother from inside the womb. The night before the trip, Leah was packing a small bag when she found Derek's letter in the drawer. She reread it carefully, each word now carrying a different weight. The promises sounded hollow, the apologies empty, the regret performative. She folded the letter again and put it in a folder with other documents. It would be more evidence, another piece in the puzzle that told the story of a marriage that had begun with hope and ended in violence. The bus ride to Portland was long and uncomfortable. Being 8 months pregnant didn't mix well with 4 hours in a narrow seat. Leah tried to sleep, but the baby wouldn't stop moving, and her mind spun in circles, thinking about what she would say, how she would react to seeing Derek again. Rebecca was waiting for them at the bus station, her car already parked, and a smile that tried to be encouraging but couldn't hide her concern. She took them straight to her apartment, where she had prepared the guest room with clean sheets and fresh flowers. "The hearing is tomorrow at 9, she said. "Mr. Reynolds confirmed he'll be there at 8:30 to talk with you beforehand." Leah thanked her and went to bed early, but sleep didn't come easily. She lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the city that had once been her home, but now felt strange and distant. Portland, with its fast pace, its honking cars, its hurried people, so different from the coast, from the slow time of the waves, the comforting silence of rainy afternoons. In the morning, she dressed carefully. She wore a navy blue blouse and a black skirt that Marcia had altered to accommodate her belly. She tied her hair back in a low ponytail. She put on a touch of lipstick so she wouldn't look sick. She wanted to look presentable, dignified, strong, even if inside she was falling apart. The courthouse was a grey, imposing building downtown, with wide corridors that echoed with footsteps and voices. Mr. Reynolds met them at the entrance, a man in his mid-40s with greying hair combed back, a dark suit, and a well-worn leather briefcase. "How are you, Leah?" "Nervous." "That's normal. Let's go up. I'll explain how it will work." They went up to the 3rd floor where the courtrooms were. Mr. Reynolds explained everything patiently. She would go in, be sworn in, answer questions from the judge, the prosecutor, and the defense attorney. Derek would be present but couldn't speak to her directly. Then it would be his turn to testify, but she wouldn't have to be in the room for that. "What if I can't speak?" "You will. Take a deep breath. Look at the judge. Focus on the questions. Don't think about Derek. Think about your son. You're doing this for him." Leah nodded, placing her hand on her belly as she always did when she needed courage. The courtroom was smaller than she had imagined, a long table where the judge, the prosecutor, and the court reporter sat. Chairs on either side for the parties and their lawyers, white walls, fluorescent lights, air conditioning that was too cold. Derek was already there. Leah saw him as soon as she entered. He was sitting next to his lawyer, a young man with glasses and an ill-fitting suit. He had lost weight. His face was thinner, his eyes sunken, his beard shaved but his hair in need of a cut. He wore a white dress shirt and jeans. He seemed smaller somehow, less threatening. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Leah saw something in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or just fear of the consequences. It didn't matter anymore. She looked away and focused on the table in front of her. The judge was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and the tired expression of someone who had seen too many cases like this. He began the hearing with formalities, read from the file, explained the procedures. Then he called Leah to the stand. She stood up, her legs shaky, and went to the indicated chair. She took the oath with her right hand raised, her voice coming out firmer than she expected. She sat down and waited. The questions came. The prosecutor, a woman in her 30s with a clear, objective voice, asked about the relationship, the history of abuse, the specific night that had led to the report. Leah answered everything, each word costing a piece of her soul, but coming out nonetheless. She told them about the marriage that had started well, about Derek's gradual change, about the drinking, about the angry outbursts, about the control, about the constant fear, and about that rainy Friday when everything had overflowed. Derek's lawyer tried to question her, to suggest she was exaggerating, that it had just been an argument that got out of hand. But Mr. Reynolds intervened whenever necessary, and the prosecutor reconstructed the facts with surgical precision. When she finished, Leah was exhausted. She stood up from the chair with difficulty, her belly heavy, the baby kicking as if sensing the tension. She left the room without looking at Derek again. Outside in the hallway, Marcia and Rebecca were waiting for her. They hugged her from both sides, creating a human shield against the world. "It's over," Rebecca whispered. "You did it. You got through it." Leah said nothing. She just closed her eyes and breathed. Derek testified next. Leah didn't stay to listen. She didn't need to. She already knew he would deny, downplay, try to justify. It was always like that. But now there was an official record. There were witnesses. There was a system, flawed as it was, trying to deliver justice. The next day they returned to the coast. The bus ride back was calmer. Leah looked out the window, watching the landscape change from urban to natural, from grey to green, from concrete to sea. She felt strangely light, as if she had left a huge weight in that courtroom and could now breathe again. When they arrived in Seaside, the sun was setting. The streets were empty, the tourists having left after the holiday weekend. Marcia's house awaited them, quiet and welcoming. Leah went inside, dropped her bag in the room, changed her clothes, and went straight to the porch. She sat in the rocking chair that Marcia had bought especially for her, placed her hand on her belly, and felt the baby move. 1 month. 1 month until the birth. 1 month to meet the face of the being who had grown inside her amidst so much chaos. 1 month to officially begin the new life she had chosen on that silent morning months ago. The future was still scary. There were so many uncertainties, so many unanswered questions, but there were also possibilities. There were choices that were now hers to make. There was a child who would be born in safety, away from violence, surrounded by love. And that, Leah was beginning to understand, was already so much more than she had had in years. The ocean crashed on the sand below, rhythmic and eternal, a silent witness to all the transformations a woman could go through when she finally chose herself. The first strong kick came at 3 in the morning on a Saturday in May. Leah woke with a start, a sharp pain shooting across her belly like a wave that starts slow and ends by crashing with force. She lay still for a few seconds, trying to figure out if it was real or just another of the normal pregnancy discomforts that had become a constant companion in recent weeks. Then came another contraction, and another. "Marcia," she called, her voice still hoarse with sleep. "Marcia." Her mother-in-law appeared at the bedroom door in less than a minute, her robe barely tied, her glasses crooked on her face. One look at Leah was enough. "Is it time?" "I think so." They had everything planned. The hospital bag had been packed for weeks, stored in the closet with tiny folded clothes, diapers, documents. Marcia grabbed the phone and called the taxi, whose number was taped to the fridge, specifically for this moment. 15 minutes, the driver said. Leah got up, slowly, breathing deeply between the contractions that were coming closer and closer together. She put on sweatpants and a loose shirt, slipped on her sandals. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the bag, not from fear, but from a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. She was going to meet her son, After 9 months of carrying him, protecting him, talking to him, she was finally going to see his face. The drive to the hospital in Astoria took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Every speed bump was torture, every turn a test of endurance. Marcia held Leah's hand, murmuring words of encouragement, breathing along with her. The hospital was small but clean, with light green walls and the smell of disinfectant. The nurse at the reception desk attended to them quickly, put Leah in a wheelchair even though she insisted she could walk, and took her straight to the labor and delivery room. The doctor came in shortly after, the same one who had monitored her entire pregnancy. Dr. Peterson, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a reassuring smile. He examined Leah, checked her dilation, listened to the baby's heartbeat. Everything looks good. About 3 centimeters already. It'll be a little while yet, but this boy is in a hurry. Leah tried to smile, but another contraction came and took all her concentration. She squeezed Marcia's hand hard, breathing as they had taught her in the birthing classes, trying to ride the wave of pain instead of fighting it. The hours dragged on. 4 in the morning, 5, 6. The sun began to rise outside, painting the sky pink and orange, but Leah barely noticed. She was in her own world now, where only the pain, the breathing, and the growing certainty that soon, very soon, everything would change existed. Marcia didn't leave her side for a minute. She wiped the sweat from her forehead, offered her water, massaged her back. She was the mother Leah had never truly had, the presence that made all the difference between going through this alone or with support. At 8 in the morning, Dr. Peterson returned to examine her and smiled. 10 centimeters. It's time. Let's go to the delivery room. Leah's heart raced. After everything, after all the months of waiting, of fear, of rebuilding, the moment had finally arrived. They moved her to the delivery room, a cold white room full of equipment and bright lights. They helped her get into position, explained what to do, when to push, how to breathe. And then the real work began. Push, Leah. That's it, with all your strength. The baby is almost here. She pushed with everything she had, feeling her body split, open, make way for this new life. The pain was beyond anything she had ever experienced, but there was also something primitive and powerful in it. Her body knew what to do. Her body was made for this. Another contraction, another push. Marcia's voice beside, her firm and encouraging. The doctor's voice professional and calm. The sound of the monitors, the constant beep of the baby's heart. And then, after a final effort that took all the air from her lungs, she heard the most beautiful sound she had ever heard in her life. A cry, loud, indignant, vibrant. "It's a healthy boy," Dr. Peterson announced, lifting the baby for her to see. Leah saw the small reddish body, the flailing arms, the mouth open in a cry. She saw him and broke down in tears. They placed the baby on her chest, still connected, by the umbilical cord, still wet and perfect. She looked at that scrunched-up little face and felt the entire world reorganize itself. Everything she had been through, every pain, every fear, every moment of doubt, had all led to this tiny, perfect human being who looked at her with dark, curious eyes. "Hi," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Hi, my love. I'm your mum." The baby stopped crying for an instant, as if recognizing the voice he had heard for 9 months from inside the womb. Then he started crying again, and Leah laughed even as she cried too. Marcia was beside her, tears streaming down her face, her hand on her grandson's head. "He's beautiful, Leah. Perfect. 7 pounds, 20 inches, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Everything working perfectly, healthy, strong, alive." When they finally took her to the room, it was almost 10 in the morning. Leah was exhausted in a way that went beyond the physical, but she was also more awake than ever. She held the baby in her arms, wrapped in a light blue blanket, a tiny little hat on his head. She had decided on the name weeks ago, but was only sure now, looking at him. "Gabriel, his name will be Gabriel," Marcia smiled. "It's a beautiful name, strong. It means messenger of God, or strength of God. I read it somewhere. It suits him." Rebecca arrived in the early afternoon, bringing flowers and a teddy bear almost as big as the baby. She entered the room, saw Leah in bed with Gabriel in her arms, and stopped at the door with her hand over her mouth. "Leah, come meet Gabriel." Rebecca approached slowly, as if in a sacred temple. She looked at the baby and the tears started to fall before she could control them. "He's perfect, just like you. Do you want to hold him?" "Can I?" Leah carefully handed the baby to her friend, and Rebecca held him as if he were precious porcelain. She rocked him gently, murmuring nonsense, smiling through her tears. "Welcome to the world, Gabriel. You have the bravest mom I know, and an army of women who will protect you." The three of them stayed there, plus the baby, in a moment of peace so pure that Leah wanted to save it in her memory forever. After so much chaos, so much pain, so much rebuilding, here was the living proof that it had all been worth it. Every difficult decision, every tear, every moment of fear. They stayed in the hospital for 3 days, long enough for Leah to learn to breastfeed, change diapers, understand the different types of cries. Gabriel was a calm baby, slept well, ate eagerly. The nurses said she was lucky, that not all babies were so peaceful, but Leah didn't think it was luck. She thought that somehow Gabriel felt the peace around him, the absence of tension, the love that surrounded him. When they returned, home to Seaside, Marcia had prepared everything. The crib that had been Derek's as a child was set up in Leah's room, lined with new sheets. There were organized diapers, washed and ironed clothes, sterilized bottles. The first few days were a blur of feedings every 2 hours, dirty diapers, stolen naps when Gabriel slept. Leah moved on autopilot, her body sore from the C-section, her breasts tender, her eyes permanently swollen from exhaustion. But it was a different kind of tired than she had felt during the pregnancy. It was a tired with a purpose. Every time she looked at Gabriel sleeping in his crib, every time he grabbed her finger with his tiny hand, every time he made those little faces in his sleep, it was all worth it. 2 weeks after the birth, Mr. Reynolds called with news about the case. Derek had been convicted. A suspended sentence, 2 years of probation, an obligation to continue counseling, and a restraining order. He could request mediated visits with his son after 6 months, but he would need to prove he was in recovery. Leah listened to it all in silence, Gabriel sleeping in her arms. "How do you feel about that?" Mr. Reynolds asked. She thought for a moment. Relieved, not happy because there's nothing to celebrate in all this, but relieved that there's an official record, that it wasn't in vain. "He'll probably appeal, but the protective order remains active for longer. You're safe. Thank you for everything." After she hung up, she sat on the porch, Gabriel still asleep, the sound of the sea below. She thought about Derek. She still thought about him sometimes, not with longing but with a diffuse sadness for what could have been and never was. He had lost so much. He had lost a family. He had lost the chance to be present at his son's birth. He had lost the opportunity to be different from his father, to break the cycle. But those were his choices, not hers. The months went by. Gabriel grew quickly, gained weight, started smiling around 6 weeks. His first smile was for Leah during a diaper change, a toothless, drooly smile that made her cry with joy. Connie from the restaurant had held the job for her, and Leah went back when Gabriel was 3 months old. She took the baby with her, putting him in a stroller next to her desk while she organized the spreadsheets. He would sleep or watch the movement around him with curious eyes. It was during one of those afternoons at the restaurant that the idea that would change everything came to her. Connie had a friend who was struggling to organize the finances of a small inn. "Don't you teach this stuff? Basic bookkeeping for small businesses?" Leah stopped typing. "No, but I could." The seed was planted. That night, after putting Gabriel to sleep, she stayed awake thinking. She had the experience, she had the knowledge, and she had seen both at the restaurant and at other small businesses in the area how much people needed help organizing their finances. She talked to Marcia the next morning. "I was thinking of moving back to Portland." Her mother-in-law stopped folding clothes, surprised. "Why? Are you unhappy here? No, quite the opposite. Here I learned to live again, but I need my own home, my own space, and in Portland I can do more. I can teach bookkeeping, give classes, build something of my own. Marcia nodded slowly, understanding. You're right. It's time. But promise you'll visit. Every week if you'll let me. It took 2 months to organize everything. Rebecca helped her find a small apartment to rent in the Selwood neighborhood, a simple 2-bedroom place with plenty of light and close to public transportation. The apartment she had shared with Derek had been sold, and her share of the money was used to furnish the new place and have a safety net. When she finally moved, on a sunny Saturday in September, Gabriel was almost 5 months old. He was a chubby, smiling baby who could roll over and babbled sounds that seemed to want to be words. The new apartment smelled of fresh paint and had that energy of a new beginning. Leah set up the crib in the smaller bedroom, organized the tiny kitchen, hung simple curtains on the windows. It was small, it was modest, but it was hers. Her space, her rules, her life. Rebecca spent the day helping, carrying boxes, hanging pictures, assembling furniture. When everything was more or less in place, the two sat on the floor of the empty living room with glasses of juice and a curious Gabriel crawling among the boxes. You did it, Rebecca said. Look at you, look where you are. Leah looked around, at the apartment that was hers, at the son sleeping safely, at the life she had built from the ashes. I did it, she repeated, as if she needed to hear it out loud to believe it. The following month, she placed an ad in the local paper and on Facebook groups, private bookkeeping classes for small business owners, learn to organize your business finances, affordable rates, flexible hours. Her first student was a woman who owned a craft store and knew nothing about invoices. The second was a couple who had opened a bakery and were lost in taxes. The third, fourth, fifth. In 2 months, she had 10 regular students. She taught the classes in her own apartment at the small living room table, while Gabriel slept or played on the rug beside her. She taught with patience, explained the basic concepts, helped them create simple spreadsheets. She didn't charge much, but it was enough to pay the bills with a little left over. More importantly, it was hers, built with her own effort, her knowledge, her determination. In November, Gabriel turned 8 months old. He could sit, up on his own, laughed out loud, and reached out his little arms when he saw Leah coming. He was a happy child, surrounded by love, growing up in an environment where there were no screams, no violence, no fear. Derek had requested a mediated visit when Gabriel turned 6 months old. Leah had agreed after much thought, not for him, but for her son. One day Gabriel would ask questions, and she wanted to be able to say she had given his father every possible opportunity. The visits happened once a month in a designated space with a social worker present. Leah did not participate. She would drop Gabriel off and leave, returning an hour later. She didn't ask how they went. She didn't want to know. That was between father and son. She had done her part. In December, exactly 1 year after that rainy Friday that had changed everything, Leah woke up early. Gabriel was still asleep in his crib, a blonde angel with rosy cheeks. She went to the kitchen and started making breakfast. She put the coffee on, fried eggs, toasted bread. The same gestures as that morning a year ago. But everything was different now. There was no fear, no tension, no one she needed to serve to avoid conflict. It was just her, making breakfast for herself and her son. A breakfast that was joy, not survival. A breakfast that was freedom. Gabriel woke up crying, and she picked him up, carrying him to the kitchen. She sat at the table with him in her lap, gave him the bottle she had prepared, and as he drank, looking up at her with those trusting eyes, Leah understood the full dimension of what she had done. On that morning a year ago, when she had served coffee to Derek and then called the police, she hadn't just saved herself. She had saved Gabriel. She had given him the chance to grow up without witnessing violence, without normalizing abuse, without learning that love is synonymous with pain. She had broken the cycle. The tears came, but they were tears of gratitude, for having found courage when she needed it most, for having had Rebecca, Marcia, people who had supported her when she was falling, for having survived. Gabriel finished his bottle and let out a loud burp, making Leah laugh through her tears. She wiped his little mouth and put him in his high chair, giving him small pieces of bread to explore with his little hands. She looked out the kitchen window. Outside, Portland was waking up to another Saturday. The sky was clear, cloudless, a deep blue that promised a beautiful day. She thought about everything she had lost: the marriage, the illusion of a traditional family, the home she had shared with Derek, the version of herself that thought she had to endure everything. And she thought about everything she had gained: safety, freedom, peace, a healthy son, her own purpose, herself, back. The phone rang. It was Marcia, calling as she did every morning to see how they were. "Good morning, honey, how are you two?" "We're good, Marcia. We're really good." And they were. For the first time in a long time, they were truly good. After breakfast, she gave Gabriel a bath, changed him into clean clothes, and they went to the living room. She had a class scheduled for 10, a young woman who was starting a homemade cake business and needed to learn how to price her products. The doorbell rang at the exact time Leah opened the door with Gabriel in her arms, smiling and professional. "Good morning, please come in." While she explained the basic concepts of costs and profit margins, Gabriel played on the rug beside them, babbling his almost words. The student asked questions, took notes in a notebook, and glanced at Gabriel from time to time with a smile. When the class ended and the woman left, Leah sat there on the living room floor with Gabriel. He had grabbed a notepad she used for notes and was trying to eat it, drooling all over it. "We don't eat that, my love," she said, taking the paper from his little mouth. Gabriel protested with an indignant squeal, and she laughed, kissing his head. "You little drama king." She thought about what the future would be like. Gabriel growing up, asking questions, needing answers. One day she would have to explain about his father, about why they didn't live together, about everything that had happened. But when that day came, she would be ready. And more importantly, Gabriel would be growing up in a home where love didn't hurt, where women weren't diminished, where respect was the foundation of everything. He would learn, by watching her every day, that his mother was strong, that she had courage, that she had chosen his safety above all else. And that would make all the difference. The afternoon passed at a calm pace. Another class, lunch, Gabriel's nap. Leah used the free time to study a bit about taxes for small businesses, wanting to improve what she taught. When Gabriel woke up, she took him for a walk in the park near their home. He loved the baby swings, squealing with joy every time he went up. Other mothers were there too, and Leah exchanged smiles with them, belonging to that silent community of women raising children, each with her own story. Back at home, she prepared a simple dinner: vegetable puree for Gabriel, rice and chicken for herself. She gave him a bath, put him in his soft pajamas, read him a cloth book with colorful pictures. He yawned, rubbing his little eyes. "Time for bed, my love." She put him in his crib, covered him with his blanket, kissed his forehead. Gabriel fell asleep almost instantly, his little face relaxed, his breathing soft. Leah stood there watching him sleep as she did every night. She never got tired of it, of seeing that small, perfect life she had created, that she was creating. She went back to the living room, made some tea, and sat on the sofa. The house was quiet, just the distant noise of traffic outside. She picked up her phone and opened her photos. There were hundreds of Gabriel, smiling, sleeping, playing, making faces. But there was also an old photo of her and Derek, taken 5 years ago, two strangers she barely recognized. She looked at that photo for a long moment, then deleted it. She didn't need it anymore. There was no point in keeping it. The future was uncertain. It always would be. She didn't know if the students would keep coming. She didn't know what it would be like to raise Gabriel alone for the next few years. She didn't know if she would ever be able to trust someone again, if she would have the courage to open herself up to another relationship. But she knew she was alive, that she had chosen to live, and that breakfast a year ago hadn't been the end of a story. It had been the beginning. Dear listeners, we hope Leah's story has deeply touched your hearts. If you were moved by the journey of this courageous mother who found the strength to start over and protect her son, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which part of the story resonated with you the most. Leah's transformation shows us that it's never too late to choose safety, respect, and self-love. Every day, we bring intense stories like this one, revealing the strength and courage of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Your participation is very important to us. We'll see you in the next episode with another story that will move and inspire you.